How are you all doing? Am I getting loud enough? Yes, okay. How are you all doing? I'm here with Ali and Eden, and I'm going to let the conversation be an exploratory means to understand the both of them because they're doing some fantastic work. Jumping straight into it, you both have had a very interesting journey up until this point. Eden, you started off as a ballet dancer, worked your way from LA to New York, and then decided you desired something else. Ali, you went from struggling through high school to getting into BU to not taking the offer, going to Israel and training and working for the IDF. What do you both feel about your lives now that you look back? Any of you can begin.
Big question.
Yeah, that's hard.
It's supposed to be vague, yes.
Yeah, pretty open-ended.
I guess I just feel really lucky that
You
I
have
ended
no
up
regrets?
here. No, I have no regrets at all. Because all the things I went through with dance led me to this point and to Columbia.
Right.
And I don't think I would have ended up here if it was straight out of high school.
Right. How about you?
I feel very, very similarly. I feel like throughout this journey where I found myself in like such crazy places, I came to the conclusion that like every stop along the way leads you to that next point. And I'm so grateful to be here today that I look back and I think what a blessing it was that, you know, I decided not to go to Boston University, and then it brought me to the Army, and I met all these amazing people along the way, and then eventually it led me to Columbia, which is like Eden said, I never would have gotten here if it hadn't been for that journey.
Right.
And each step along the way leading me to the next thing.
Right, because it's this opportunity that you are so grateful, the both of you, is something that's afforded to more than the three of us. There's an entire community out there that's been afforded this opportunity, and in general, I've noted that the levels of gratefulness tend to be higher within the set of people because they realize probably that straight out of high school they might not have been able to afford such an intellectual education and so on. But what's fascinating to me is almost this tabula rasa sense of gratefulness that you guys bring to the table, and I hope as we speak further about mindfulness and meditation and whatnot, we might be able to explore how is it that you edit your psychology to always look on the upside in that sense, because frankly I know a lot of other people have issues with not keeping regrets.
I really like how you put that, like editing your psychology. I think that's a really interesting way to think about it.
I borrowed it directly from Daniel Kahneman. He has a phrase called hedonic editing, where you can edit a situation, a decision outcome. You can edit your perception in such a fashion that you always produce the best possible outcome. It's a part of prospect theory. I'm taking a fucking course in the subject. So, Eden, I hear the bunhead phenomena is a toxic truism in the ballet world. So many of my ballet dancer friends tell me that they consistently carry in them a very cynical and loud voice of criticism. And this phenomena isn't limited to the ballet world. I myself have a constant gnawing sense of impending doom packaged in my own voice, in my own head, that I have to learn to live with. Did you experience any of that?
Oh yeah, I still do. I mean, it's a continually evolving process of kind of getting rid of that voice.
Right.
Or just being able to name it and see it for what it is.
Right.
And choose whether to listen to it or not.
So is that how you deal with it? Is that how you move beyond this point where the voice of criticism stops bothering you, is by acknowledging it first?
I think so. I mean, people say what you resist persists. So I try not to resist it or like shame that voice, because for me it is so tied to my ballet background. And yeah, the more you can just notice it and say, why am I thinking that? Like, why do I think the world's going to end? Or why do I think, this horrible thing? Why do I think, I'm going to get in a car crash? Or like, my mind goes to like death a lot of the time.
Okay, that's kind of concerning.
No, but I
think
people. Brene Brown talks about that.
Yeah, it's just kind of going to the worst case scenario type thing.
Right.
And there's something else I heard somewhere, I can't recall right now, but it was in like a Kundalini class, I think.
Interesting.
It was that the part of your brain that's wired for survival is like what kicks in first. So in a sense, that's like the negative.
The amygdala, yes.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So it's telling you, make sure you don't like...
Fight and flight.
Yeah.
Fight and flight, always, right?
Make sure you don't step out in the street before looking, or, make sure that your paper is perfect before you turn it in.
Right.
And then after that, the other part of your brain.
The prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know psychology well, so.
No, this is neuroscience. But I only know as much. I only know 3 words, so I could just like float them around, pretend like I know what I'm talking about. I see. How does one... How does this function? Why is it that so many people within this industry get afflicted with what is... And help people understand what the bunhead mindset is too.
Bunhead is kind of a funny term. I guess you can use it in a derogatory way.
Right.
It's just, someone who's always has their hair in a bun because presumably they're coming or going to ballet class.
Right.
And that was totally me. I went to a summer camp when I was maybe 11 or 12 and I did regular summer camp things like swimming. I did tennis, and I wore my hair in a ballet bun every single day.
Right.
Even though I wasn't really doing ballet, which is kind of, I don't know, it's just funny. It's like something about your identity.
Right, because I think it's also, anybody who's invested in ballet to the extent that you've been invested in your past begins at a very, very formative age. Like it's usually 3, 4, 5, something around that time. And then they stay on the course for the next 10, 15 years, which is again a very, very formative part for anybody's growth. And so they almost, from what I gathered, they almost embody this sense of criticism for their own self where nothing ever approximates perfection. And even the most marginal of differences between what is actual and what is ideal bothers them a lot. Is that an accurate way of putting it across? The bunhead mindset?
I think so.
Right?
Yeah, and I think it comes from in those formative years having teachers who impart this way of thinking on you.
Right.
And really that is taught as the only way to improve, is to be constantly vigilant about every single part of your body down to your fingernails, like eyelashes. I had teachers who would talk about, what are your eyelashes doing? Like, be aware of your eyelashes.
For real?
Yes, that much detail. Like, as if you can control your eyelashes, you know? But it's the mental part of it where you just are that vigilant about every part of your body.
Right.
And
if
so you apply that to everything in your life.
And just out of curiosity, and I'm pretty sure this question's a little tough to answer right in the moment, but if I were to allow you to go back in time, say when you were 6 or 7, when you were getting into the machinery of the ballet world as an immersive exercise, where would you draw the line? Because some of the stuff that presumably the ballet teachers impart is clearly toxic. Like, you have no control over what your eyelashes are looking like, right? So where would you tell young Eden where to draw the line between listening to criticism that is worth it and criticism that's absolutely not worth it?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, this is actually something I thought a lot about when I was about 16, because I was at a ballet school where they were very critical of what seemed like my personality. Not like, yes.
That's really hard to believe.
No, I was told constantly that I was lazy. And I wasn't lazy. I was dancing 12 hours a day.
If anything, you're slow.
Well, I think it really had to do with my kind of, quiet.
Right. This very relaxed energy that you have about you. Right.
And
I can see why it could make people uncomfortable. Not because it is uncomfortable inherently, but if there is a very active energy that corresponds, that interacts with you, it's very difficult for it to make sense of why you were so relaxed. That was one of the first things that I told you when we met, was that your ways are very... Because I am that active energy. I'm constantly need to be talking or thinking, So I get that. I see.
I mean, I'm constantly thinking, but I'm not constantly talking.
That I think that's monumental, because that just does not happen for me.
Yeah, but so my teachers there were very critical of it. It felt really personal and not like it was about my dancing,
right?
But more just about who I am as a person. And in some sense, when you're a dancer, you're also an actor.
You're a performer.
You're a performer, and you play roles, and you have to act. And so, I realized at that time that I didn't need to take the criticism personally, but take it as more of like an acting coach or something, like
Right.
in that kind
Right.
of way.
Right.
But it was hard to implement at that time because it is so personal.
Right.
And
I mean, if anybody is transgressing boundaries where they're moving beyond just the performance aspect of your exercise to the more personal aspect, I think that would be a safe enough place to draw a line, right? So like my personality has nothing to do with my performance.
Yeah.
Right, I can, as loud as my personality is, I know how to stay silent, and this is just me speaking for myself.
Yeah.
I see. That's fairly interesting. Yeah. Ali, for the love of God, I can imagine very few people bold enough to put themselves in a military uniform. I have all the respect for the cause and the inspiration, but I must ask, what made you turn away from the comfortable life in America and want to get involved with the Israeli Defense Forces?
There's a lot of moving parts to the answer to that question. Part of it is the fact that I grew up Jewish, and I grew up in sort of, there were other Jews in the school that I went to, but they didn't really identify as Jewish in the same way that I did, and sort of in the same way that my mom instilled Judaism in me, which was that it's a very cultural thing.
Right.
And growing up around people who came from interfaith marriages, she would tell me like, oh, they're less Jewish, or the people around you who are Christian are different. And, and I look back and I regret having been raised with those sort of ideals like in the home, but I can't change my mom, and that's sort of what she instilled in me.
Right.
So all of a sudden coming to this haven, so to speak, where everyone comes from what I thought to be like the same background,
right,
felt really safe.
You mean in the defense forces?
No, in Israel.
In Israel. Once you were in Israel, right.
Yeah,
okay.
Being in a place where everyone is Jewish. And then there was this other piece to it where I was 17 and I was taking a gap year in Israel, and I had made the decision, I grew up outside of Boston, I had made a decision to go to Boston University. And I didn't think too much into it when I applied early decision and I got in. And I think that it never really spoke to me, and I sort of knew somewhere that it wasn't my path.
Right.
And what I've always been missing is like community. And I heard about this program called Greene that is for lone soldiers. So that's for people who want to join the army or are in the army that don't have immediate family living in the country. And you go to these seminars and you meet these other people that are your age that also like love the country and are leaving a lot behind, and you live together on a kibbutz somewhere like in a remote part of the country. And there was something about that community and having those like built-in friends that automatically become your family because you go through so much together that really appealed to me. And it was sort of like weighing the choice. I can remember every single day on my gap year I was deciding whether to go back to Boston or whether to stay in Israel, and I would write down every single day like what decision I came to for a month. And eventually like it just outweighed, and I knew that I wanted to stay in Israel. But the choice was like, do I want to go back and live in a dorm and do sort of the same social situation that never really worked for me in high school, or do I want to like move to this kibbutz with a built-in family?
Right.
And for me, it just felt like the obvious choice, like let's go on this whole adventure. And I don't think it was as much about being in the army and Zionism the way it is for a lot of people where they feel so loyal to the land.
Right.
It was not wanting to go back to America, and it was like really loving the culture and really wanting to be
part of something.
Yeah, and part of a community that is just so much warmer than the one that I grew up in.
When I speak to veterans from the American Army, when I meet them on campus, they all mention that leaving the Army was tough, or at least tougher than what I'd imagine them to be saying. Like I said, it's extremely hard for me to imagine somebody investing their life, putting their life on the line when they join defense forces. But they mentioned that it's tough because it's sort of this loss of community, this loss of brotherhood, particularly because it's a male-dominated endeavor, at least in America. Did you feel something similar, like you lost family when you had to finish your training, your participation in the military?
I think it's very different. The U.S. military and the Israeli army. You rarely see people getting out of the army in Israel whose day when they get to cut their army ID and like return their uniform and everything, that day is usually a celebration.
Oh, that's a celebration.
Yeah, and something that we do have in common with my friends who are U.S. military vets that we talk about is the biggest challenge of being in military service is the boredom. It's feeling like you're not doing anything meaningful. And my friends who are Army Rangers and my friends who are in like the most elite units in the Israeli Army will both say the same thing.
Wow.
So even these people who are in these really prestigious places always feel like at some point your time is being wasted. And while I think that in the US they build a lot of brotherhood because it's also such a longer commitment.
Right.
In Israel it's 2 years for women and 2 years 8 months for men. And there's sort of this inherent, like every single person in the army in Israel has this app on their phone called Pazam that counts down like to the second how much more time you have left in your service.
Wow.
And it's sort of this, once you're in it, there's such a lack of freedom. And because you're close to home and that you're traveling back and forth from wherever your home is to base, and then you're counting on the days, you know, I go home in 2 weeks, I go home in 5 days, I go home in 3 weeks.
Right.
You sort of feel the lack of freedom more than anything. And it feels like you're running this marathon only to get to the end and have like the world is your oyster. And that's why so many Israelis go on trips afterwards. They go to India, they go to South America, they go to New Zealand, they go to Australia,
it's called the
it
big
is.
Trip, right? Something like that?
Yeah, they do. They call it like the big trip after the army.
Because I'm assuming the population in Israel, and I've interacted with the population in Israel to whatever extent I have, is a varied spectrum, and there must be extremely nationalistic people who would be willing to serve in the army, and there'd be fairly nationalistic and moderately and so on, all the way to absolutely anti-nationalistic as well. Have you observed a phenomena where people getting into the military and by the time they leave they're more nationalistic, they understand the idea of Zionism in the way or the ways of Israel a little more, they're more comfortable with that? Does that happen?
So you're asking if by the end of their service they become more Zionist?
Right, more Zionist or more nationalist, or however they express love for their nation.
I would venture to say that the opposite happens.
Oh, the opposite happens.
Yeah. I think that Israelis have a better sense going into it what a difficult experience it's going to be.
Right.
But I know in lone soldier communities, and now because I've already been through the army, it's this funny phenomenon where you get out of the army and you meet this person that's basically you like 3 years ago who wants to join the army, and they're so excited and they love Israel and it's Zionism and whatever, and you know it's this beautiful place and it's our homeland, and then you see them in the army and they say things like fuck the army, like what am I doing here? And even my friends who stayed in the military and you know are still in it, I got out a year and a half ago and they're still in it, they love it, but they could cite many issues with it. And I wouldn't say that the reason why they're still there is because of nationalism or Zionism or love for the country. It's more that they love their jobs. They love waking up every day in this like very ordered, position that makes sense.
But I'm curious, because if you put 18-year-olds right out of high school into the military, that just does not seem smart in terms of the fact that this set of 18-year-olds is bubbling with energy. There is all these hormones flowing, you're just beginning to discover the world in so many ways and whatnot. And if you put them in such a rigorous place as such immediately, that seems a little counterintuitive to me. Why do you why is this branch of the machinery when it comes to the military, this compulsory military set of people who get in, is it a very important integral part of the whole thing? Why does Israel have this provision at all?
Well, we have it because we need it.
So there is a need.
Yeah, we don't have the manpower. We wouldn't have enough people to volunteer.
Right.
To keep the country alive, and also nowadays people are less Zionist. Back when in 1948, everybody was volunteer.
Right.
They weren't drafting anyone. There was no one to draft. There was no one in the country. But now the rates at about half the people that are drafted wind up actually going. It's only about half the country that actually winds up serving in the military. A lot of the people that don't are Arabs or really religious or really
they get
liberal.
exclusions, right? Okay.
Right, and they get exclusions.
I mean, how do you get exclusion on grounds of being liberal? Like, what do you say to that?
They say they don't believe in it, and they'll do like a year of service instead. So they'll volunteer in schools or they'll do community service kind of things.
Fair.
And also the religious girls will do that, will opt to teach in schools for a year, and the men just continue
study
their
and teach, and they get paid for that.
Yeah.
Right, okay. To bring the two of you to a convergent point, how in the process of all of this did either of you look at the spiritual facet of life? How did you get to that point when going through the motions of all of this?
Do you want to start?
You mean in life in general?
Yeah.
So I just grew up around a lot of spiritualism. My parents are both very spiritual. So it was, and being from Los Angeles, it's just always kind of in the air.
Right. There's a lot of things in the air in Los Angeles. I mean, I hear descriptions. I've barely ever been, but fair. So you found yourself just like since you were growing up surrounded by the...
Yeah, I was just aware of things.
Right.
Things like yoga and meditation.
And it continued through your career in ballet. You were always...
I had a little detour in my teenage years.
Right.
As you know, because it was such a big part of my mom's life and our home. I had my rebellious phase where I just didn't want to look at those things. But then when I was about 17, I got really sick with hormonal stuff, with polycystic ovary syndrome. And that because of that, I had to stop dancing for almost a year. And so just having to slow down in that way, I really looked inside myself and asked myself those big questions like, why are we here? What's the purpose of life?
Right.
And kind of found my own way back to spirituality through that.
Fancy. So there was this existential moment of reflection which pushed you back in the same direction as you were when you were younger, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How about you? Where'd you find that?
My experience is a little different because I grew up in a home with both my parents are certified public accountants and definitely not spiritual people in any way.
Accountants tend to be soulless. I can say that from experience.
A little bit soulless, yeah.
Both my parents are accountants as well. I can tell you that for a fact, yes.
Very logical people. But basically, I didn't really find spirituality until I was in the Army and I got assigned to do a job where I had nothing to do.
Right.
And
I got assigned a job that I had nothing to do.
Yeah, there was nothing to do. Like they made up a job and they said sit here and stay on this base in the middle of nowhere, with the most disgusting conditions and the really nasty food and this whole thing. And I had just uprooted my whole life thinking I'm going to do something meaningful and I'm going to wake up in the morning and have something to do and feel like I'm adding to whatever project it is that I'm trying to progress. And they had nothing for me. I woke up every single day and I sat in the office and I ate 3 crappy meals a day and I went to sleep. And I think in the monotony of it all, I became really, really hopeless and really sad. And after somewhere in this 11-month journey of fighting with the Army to try to change my job, I found this book called Outrageous Openness, which talks a lot about the concepts of divine order and divine abundance, I think it is.
Yes, divine abundance, yes.
Yeah, divine abundance, which basically says that you're always in the right place at the right time and there's always enough for everyone.
So divine order is you're always at the right place at the right time, and divine abundance is there's always enough for everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
The universe has enough for everyone. And I started to look around and wonder, well, I'm in this, the most random place in the entire world compared to this little small town that I grew up in outside of Boston. How did I get from point A to point B? And I just sort of figured out that it couldn't be for nothing.
Right.
And I looked around and I realized that I'd made incredible friends and that the base that I was living on had the most beautiful views in the entire world. And that this was the universe setting up a wall for me to figure out all on my own in a foreign country, in a language that I didn't really speak that well, how to get over it. And that's what sort of prompted me to become more spiritual, because I truly do believe that everyone is always in the right place at the right time, and whatever circumstance you find yourself in, you can always find a way out, and you can always do it with optimism. And
I think both of you, for that matter, but particularly you, I feel like I must congratulate, because boredom, for however people I've spoken to about boredom and myself, tends to be this whirlpoolish abyss that once you start falling into, you just have the hardest time recovering from, especially if you're constrained by institution like the way you were, right? It is sort of, in some fashion, divine abundance that you bumped across that book too, that opened, that in fact translated that boredom into gratefulness suddenly, right? Where you could now appreciate the views that were just beyond your office confines suddenly, you know? That's incredible. That's very solid. What does your spiritual journeys mean for you? Help me understand how you go about your spiritual journeys, and what is the objective? What are you trying to learn?
Well, I grew up in, my grandma is an extremely anxious person, and as is my mom. And when I was younger, I also suffered from anxiety. And with anxiety, I feel like everything feels so much bigger than it actually is. And I'm so grateful for my spirituality, because it grounds me in this crazy, crazy way where I don't have anxiety anymore, because I've managed to figure out when I'm going through these situations that once upon a time may have seemed really, really helpless, are part of the journey, and you can find the optimism in it. And that's not to say that I'm perfect, and Eden can attest to it, and my friends can attest to it, that I have breakdowns just like anyone else in certain situations, but I definitely think that they're more brief than they ever were in the past. And the other thing that I love about spirituality is that it really attracts like-minded people, especially like Eden and my friends who I have made since becoming spiritual, are more like-minded and more my speed, and think about the same things. And how about you?
For me, like, spirituality and my path has just been about recognizing everything as spiritual and not deeming certain things good and certain things bad, and realizing that even when you feel like you're going backwards, that's part of the journey too, and there's value in all of those experiences where you feel like, where they feel dark, or they feel challenging, or or you fail. You know, all of those things are actually steps forward, and just learning not to judge every little moment, you know, and you know.
I mean, even Mercury goes in retrograde, you know, so like moving backwards cannot be that bad. No, but
but it's only our perception that makes it that we call it going backwards. Mercury is just because it
looks like that. That is the case. Yeah, that's a good detail to the entire analogy too, because I forgot about that. I took one class in astronomy. That's how I know it from. But I think, and this is my personal view, I don't know how many people attest to that. I think the biggest problem, or at least the most massive problem in terms of solving it for humans, is the right way to orient ourselves towards this chaotic world that's outside this apartment, right? It's extremely weird, because there's facts and there's values, and then there's a variety of facts and there's a variety of values, and they all intermesh in this very weird way. And I feel like religion can be viewed as such an optimization solution for the right way to orient ourselves. And that's why stories are so important, because what stories do is they guard perception, they mold perception in a particular fashion. And I mean, I've personally found that the spiritual end of stories tend to keep me much happier, much less restricted when I orient myself towards the world, than the religious end, because the religious end automatically comes with restrictions and limitations as such. I think it's a fantastic way of looking at the world, and I speak purely from the Buddhist influence of spirituality that I've had growing up. What are the tools of your practice? Metta, yoga, crystals, kundalini, where do you borrow your resources from?
All of them.
All of them. For you, all of them.
Yeah, all of them.
Did I?
Yeah, I think it's good to try and it always changes too. Like sometimes I get into certain practice. Like it's like a flow. Whatever feels good at the moment, or whatever I'm attracted towards. But yeah, I do a lot of yoga, breath work. I love meditation. I love my crystals.
Are you still carrying some in your pocket?
I have quite a few in my pocket today.
Yeah. Do you mind if I see one of these? Is that a problem?
I'll show you the big one.
Show me the big one. Okay. Also, help me understand what it means.
This one's a bit big for a pocket
stone,
but I just wanted to
Which one is this? Today. What is this called?
It's called a rhodochrosite. I'm not positive on the pronunciation.
Rhodochrosite?
Yeah, RHODO.
What we're looking at is this ovalish, circular, red color stone crystal, something to that effect. I think I used 2 adjectives for every quality that I intended to describe, but very interesting. What is that? What is this supposed to do for you or for anybody who carries this?
Well, so the way that I think about crystals is it doesn't do anything for you. It more just is like a little reminder of whatever energy you want to hold. And
so what are you attributing? What kind of energy are you attributing to it?
You can tell a lot what their what kind of energy they tend to carry by the color of them and like what they look like. So it's pink.
So you're trying to be more fierce? Is that what's happening?
Well, it's like a heart chakra stone. So they correlate to the colors of the chakras, and in the heart chakra is green.
Right.
But like there's an upper heart chakra that's a pink energy.
Right. Okay.
And this one there's also rose quartz, which is like a one that people know a lot. It's really pretty.
I have some on my windowsill.
Oh yeah, you have some here too.
Yeah.
But this one, rhodochrosite, I think. The way I see it, it's a little bit more about compassion and
forgiveness,
self-compassion.
Self-compassion.
Sure, forgiveness goes along with it. Sure. Right. It's a little bit of a deeper color and than some rose quartz. And I don't know. Yeah, I just think it's really beautiful and it feels good to hold.
Have you ever looked into Sufism at all?
Not very deeply, no, but I am interested.
So
I want to spin.
No, I mean the dancing part of it is something I'm bereft of even now. But I got into some Sufi music. There used to be this very famous Pakistani singer. His name was Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. It's quite a mouthful, but I was just listening to his music the other day, and
Will you send some to me?
Sure, absolutely, happily. And what he would do is that he would borrow from poetry written by Hindi, Punjabi or Urdu scholars back in the day, and he would make a particular form of music called qawwalis out of them. And qawwalis is just a genre unto itself. But the most fascinating part about the poetry that he would sing was that it would all be this extremely specific yet vague enough description of love. However, it would never mention the subject of the love. And so it could be love towards the God, it could be love towards yourself, it could be love embodied in somebody else, but they never make it clear. And when you mention it could be either, when you said self-compassion, and I was bold enough to say something and interrupt you when I said forgiveness, it sort of reminded me of that, because self-compassion also involves the element of self-forgiveness. And then if it includes the concept of other people's forgiveness too, it just broadens in that sense. It becomes a piece of art to me. What are your means? What do you use when you practice your spirituality?
I love crystals, but but more for aesthetics than the meaning that they have for Eden. But I think it's really important for everyone to find something that works for them in that way. I'd say that my tools aren't as
defined,
or concrete or physical, but I I don't even know where to take this question because there's so many different things. I think that journaling and like seated meditation are great practices and great tools for me. And then as well, embodiment practice, if anyone is interested in anything like that, where it's sort of
Is it like manifestation practice, like when you say embodiment?
It's like a meditation, but there's physical elements to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I see.
And I think that...
Like vocalizing or...
Yeah. And you know when people sort of they describe this. I'm not a runner, but my dad is a runner, and I've heard many people describe this sensation of when people are exercising or when they're running, where they have that sort of mind come, and they come to this place.
The runner's high.
Yeah, the
Yes.
runner's high, or not even, because I think runner's high talks about like the euphoria that you get and like the rush of endorphins afterwards. But what I'm talking about is like the sensation of you have calmed your mind and you've united it with movement of your body. And when I do embodiment practice, I also use vocal toning. But I think this is something that if anyone is interested, they should look into.
Right.
And it's a really great practice for me in terms of releasing energy and releasing emotions. And then another great, I think, tool, which it's kind of dark, but I think it's amazing, is sort of like what Ian was saying earlier about how she thinks about death sometimes, like, and what you said about editing. I think that there's this great movement. What's his name? Do you remember his name?
Stephen Hunt?
Yeah, Stephen
Wait,
Hunt.
is that
Yeah,
it?
I think you're right. That's exactly it. Yeah. So there's this guy from Australia named Stephen Hunt who started this movement called We're All Going to Die. And he found himself in like a really, really depressed, anxious state. And one day he's like sitting there journaling, like thinking about life, contemplating things. And the sentence, "We're all going to die," came to him and became the most comforting thing in the world. And when I found him and I heard him on a podcast when I first heard about this whole philosophy, and it reminded me of something that my 9th grade English teacher said to me. And she said in front of the whole class one day of like 15-year-old dumbasses, and she says, like, all you have to do in life is die. You don't have to come to school. You don't have to brush your teeth.
Right.
You don't have to graduate from high school. There's nothing you have to do but die.
Right.
And I think that while it sounds so morbid and so aggressive, it sort of like releases this veil
of pretense that
pretense of
right.
that you're anything but free. You know, that in terms of societal pressure, in terms of your own pressure that you're putting on yourself, your own expectations, none of that exists. It's all construct. And this is something that I say to my family all the time, with like you are the maker of your own universe, and you're the maker of your own life.
Right.
And you can wake up in the morning and you can go to class and you can get straight A's, and there's just as much respect in that and just as much honor in that as saying, I'm going to stay home today.
Right.
And I'm going to take care of myself, or I'm not going to go to school and I'm going to travel for a while, or you know, whatever it is you decide to do. And I think that taking this concept of death sort of is like the purveyor, if you will, of like this whole experience that we call life.
Right. So many interesting things come to my mind. The runner's high that we were mentioning. I've never been a runner. I've always been very afraid of running, partly because I have extremely flat feet. They cause me a bunch of problems.
I'm not because of flat feet, but running it hurts.
Yeah, it hurts. Right.
It's honestly not what I was expecting you to say. I wasn't expecting the flat feet.
No, but I promised myself at the beginning of this year that I'm going to run this year, right? So I've been going on and off at running. I spent the first few months, then I stopped for a while. I was recently running again at the gym itself, which is a very small track. And I remember very distinctly after the first mile mark, I finally tapped into what people call the runner's high. And it's such a weird feeling. It's such a weird feeling because suddenly everything stops hurting. You don't feel your body anymore. I was just really swinging with my breath and I could go for as long as I'd wanted. But as soon as you realize that, you're out of it. And then you have to surrender again. And it's this very weird confluence between discipline and surrender that allows you to exercise that. I haven't really understood. I'm hoping, because right after I get done with this, I'm going to go to the gym. Hopefully, I'll be able to tap into it again. But as far as death is concerned, I don't think it's dark at all. The Stoics had an idea called memento mori, which is remember death. And for me, personally, I think the most life-changing thought experiment I've ever engaged in was imagining my death. And the way I did it, with certain help from friends, was somebody asked me, they're like, so imagine you're 82, 83, whatever fucking age you want to die at. Imagine you're lying on the bed, you're old, frail, weak, whatever, XYZ. What would you have wanted to do by then? What is it that you're going to regret? if you've not done. And you begin to list things out. I started off with the present and the past, so I want to fix all relationships I have within my family. I don't want any more bubbles that exist, And you go down the order. This is what I want to have done with so and so, so and so. And then by the time you come to the end of it, there is this very ironical, this paradoxical feeling where you're like, all of this does not make sense because I'm going to die, but I want all of this done. And so you make peace with both the voices. The veil sort of lifts and you get weirdly more zen in your approach towards life. The pressures that you mentioned suddenly collapse. It doesn't matter. Who the fuck cares? Yeah, absolutely. I had one more thing in mind, but I forgot. It just takes me a while to retain things in my...
So Stephen, who created this whole movement, he does festivals around the world, and he brings in these artists who do incredible installations all around the concept of death, whether it's like, what would your gravestone look like? And he has them do these like elaborate, beautiful things. But one of the exercises that he does is it's like you come into a room and there's this huge coffin in the middle and everyone lies down and they do a guided meditation of imagining yourself dying, and what would you want to do, and I think it sort of illuminates what's important to you, because if you can imagine yourself at the very end and you didn't get to see the pyramids in Egypt, like that's what you know.
That pissed me off so much.
That's what you know, like
Right.
All right, tomorrow I gotta go. I'm going to book this trip and I'm going to make it happen.
Right.
And another thing about this festival is it's like the most joyous celebration. Yeah, people there, it's not some depressing, we're all going to die. And people are really sitting with that and it's depressed. Like you said, it's not dark at all.
It's actually very refreshing.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know if it's just us in our 20s that we can imagine something so eventual and be happy about it, because I'm pretty sure my grandfather would not be happy about it considering he's of a certain age.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a fascinating phenomenon. There's a particular story in the Hindu texts, and I'm going to just condense it to the point where essentially there's 5 brothers who are in exile. It's from the Mahabharata, and they're looking for water. 4 of them go, they never find water, they never return. So the 5th, the oldest, the wisest, goes to fetch water, sees that the water spirit has enchanted 4 of his brothers, and the water spirit says, if you answer my questions, I'm going to let all of these people go and have you take water for yourself. And one of the questions is, what's the only truth in life? And the answer to that question is death. And I'm surprised. My father told me so many stories growing up, but those 5 questions, I remember them still by heart, even though he told me the story just once. They're the most truthful revelations that have ever been part of my childhood. It's fascinating how death operates in such a paradoxical fashion. How did all of your spiritual practices or your spiritual agendas or how did all of this get transplanted into Columbia? What is this group that you have on campus? Or at least this effort that you have on campus, if it's... I'm sorry.
Time for some shameless plugs. Go for it.
Shout out.
It took a little while. This is my 3rd year. It took Allie coming, basically.
Right.
My first few years at Columbia, I would say I was more in the closet about my spirituality. And in like becoming more comfortable with myself and just learning who I am more and being that.
Right.
Eventually I made other friends who were interested, friends at Columbia who were interested in these types of things. Because in my mind, for some reason, when I came to Columbia, I thought there's no way, there could be any kind of spiritual world there because it's so academic
so
and intellectual.
Reductionist and materialistic and whatnot. That comes with science. It's sort of like the residue of science that, it's like a postprint. But go ahead.
I think science is actually very spiritual, I think.
But I have a question just particularly for that, so I'm going to ask that in a bit.
So then I ended up in this Buddhism class with Allie, and we became friends. And Allie kind of brought to me this vision of having a mindfulness group on campus.
That's what you call it too, right? Mindfulness Columbia?
Mindful Columbia.
Mindful Columbia.
And we just saw, especially in that class, but even now, like far beyond that class, there's so many people on campus who are interested in mindfulness and meditation I get asked about chakras a lot of the time by random people.
I'm surprised they don't ask me. I mean, I look more the part. I mean, I have the skin, I have the accent, all of that.
I don't know what it is, but I get asked about chakras a lot.
Right.
And I think also because it's more in pop culture now as well. And also in academia more, like they're in psychology. There's more research being done on mindfulness.
Right, and meditation, yes, absolutely.
All these things. So people are definitely interested. There's a lot of growing interest in this, and we just wanted to create a space for us to learn and talk about and
educate
share,
people.
Yeah. Share everything that we're in the process of learning and the things that we've come to learn.
There is I've only heard residues from about it, but there's a class that a particular professor, his name's Scott Kaufman, shout out.
I'm gonna take this class next semester.
Oh, are you? I just recently emailed him, but he's reserving it for psych majors for the time being because it's a 12 people seminar that he has. Is that the one?
No, I'm talking about he teaches a big lecture
Right.
called Psychology of Living Well.
Right.
What's
The seminar is called Creativity and the Good Life.
Yeah, I saw that.
So we're doing an event with him actually as a group on the 23rd or the 25th. His expertise is in the field of intelligence. Surprisingly, very interesting guy.
Yeah, I love his podcast.
Oh yeah, I've never heard. I'm supposed to see him this
great.
Wednesday. I just emailed him. I was like, "Can I come see you? Can we be friends at this point?" You know. But I'm interested in taking that class.
Yeah. Cool.
How about you? Where did this come about for you?
In Colombia?
Yeah. At the same time you met Eden, or had you planned about it before?
The mindfulness?
Yes.
So I think that I drew a lot of inspiration from this class that we took together, where in all my other classes I felt like, similar GS phenomena, that I'm just surrounded by a lot of 18-year-olds still sort of navigating things that I went through a couple years ago. But then being in that class, I realized that there is like a community of people who are interested in going deeper and being open to more spirituality sort of things, and also mindfulness and things of that nature.
One thing I loved about the class was the professor had us start every class with like 2 or 3 minutes of some kind of body something.
Right.
So there was a lot of yoga teachers in the class, and I'm a Pilates teacher, so I just did I would give them like a few stretches to do, or we did. Ali's a yoga teacher. She taught us some breathing, and other people in the class shared things too. So it was just like the beginning of every class to just get you centered. Oh, we did eye gazing one time. That was.
I've heard it's extremely uncomfortable for a lot of people.
But that's where all the connection happens.
Right. Oh no, for
That's
sure.
where the magic is.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Space.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to bring to campus. I'd love to see this take shape, because it's a very energetic practice too. A lot of relationship coaches and counselors will do this today to bring people together, especially if you're in an intimate relationship with someone.
It's very vulnerable.
Yeah,
it's a means to tackle repressed anxiety straight to the point. Like you will gaze long enough and it just shows the insides of you to yourself. Like that's what I have noticed. I used to have such trouble making eye contact with people when I was growing up.
Yeah,
because I was socially anxious.
Yeah.
And now we're all looking at each other.
Now it's a little awkward.
Well, you can also do it with yourself in the mirror. That's a good practice, I think, too.
Oh no, I stare at myself in the mirror all the time.
But into your eyes.
Oh, I'm borderline narcissistic. Yes, into my eyes. I think I self-diagnosed myself at this point, because the building that I live in, it's a long hallway and there's just like windows on the side. So when you walk in the dark, you can almost see your reflection. And I catch myself looking at myself way too often. Then my friends begin to point out. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a little narcissistic.
Maybe you were a ballerina.
Maybe, maybe I go through but that's why I asked that question in the first place. But what is your modus operandi with this group association, whatever you have on campus? How are you going to go about spreading the word?
Okay, so this is what we are. So mindfulcolumbia is a student group dedicated to educating.
Is it so funny, really?
I just say it all the time.
We've written this, we've said it so many times that I feel like a broken record. So sort of like a parrot who loves mindfulness.
Right.
But Mindful Columbia is a newsletter that is student run. So all of our collaborators and contributors are students, and it's written for students. So we're writing about topics like, obviously, mindfulness, healthy eating, alternative stress management, meditation, chakras, spirituality, all sorts of things that I feel like people are curious about but don't really know where to go to get this information.
Right.
And we're going to include things in there also like book recommendations, podcast recommendations, easy healthy recipes for students, basically just like a whole wealth of knowledge that I feel like people have accumulated over the years that are self-care habits, and sharing them.
How can people get to you? Like, where would I find that newsletter? Would you email it to me? How does this work?
Yeah, we're going to email it.
To everybody at Columbia?
To people who
sign up. And where can people sign up?
Well, we have a website. It's going to be published very soon.
Just let me know. I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay,
in
awesome.
case somebody, even one person, listens to this. Hopefully for you guys they will. Hopefully for you guys they will. I don't know if they will listen to. I just have no faith in my audience at this point.
But we also mainly communicate through Instagram.
So
Instagram.
Instagram.
People can find a link to sign up.
What's your Instagram handle?
@mindfulcolumbia.
Is there a dot? I think it is mindful.columbia, right? Or at mindfulcolumbia.
So. Yeah.
Okay, I'll check that and I'll put it in the link as well. But do you think what you're trying to do deals with the underlying causes of the psychological woes of people at an institute like Columbia? I hear enough about the stress culture and whatnot, and I often tell people that you will find a massive dip in anxiety and depression episodes if you just better the nutritional output of students. Serve better food, cleaner food, less sugar and gluten, and you will make better bodies and you'll make better minds. Do you see your effort working in the same way to attack the root cause rather than the symptom?
No. Honestly, no. There are so many groups and resources on campus that are talking about depression and anxiety and stress management, and I think at this point we're all a little tired of hearing about how stressed we are.
Right.
And I think that the point of all of this is, and like my journey and Eden's journey is that it's not about treating anxiety or treating depression. It's about shifting your perspective little by little and seeing things in a different way.
Right. I think I did not put my question across properly.
Well, I really love, though, the idea of treating the root cause and not the symptom.
Right.
That's how I try to look at a lot of things. And that's, more of like an Eastern medicine type of mindset.
Right. Because I think I did not frame my question properly enough, even though I feel like you sort of got it. Because I know depression, anxiety, stress management, on all of that, I'm tired of hearing about it. Like the next time I hear about it, I'm going to have a breakdown myself. However, I find that there is a deeper cause to the entire problem. It's not treating depression, it's treating what is underlying that depression or anxiety for that matter. And I tend to be very focused on the nutritional aspect of the same for that particular reason. And I feel personally, having very little experience with what you guys do, that meditation for me worked tremendously well when it came to anxiety, or for that matter, I barely can focus, and I could focus once I was meditating often enough and long enough. In view of that, my question was more particularly framed to ask you if you find that your practices are actually attacking the root cause of all these symptoms that we see as depression, anxiety, and stress. Have you found it to be personally helpful for you in terms of dealing with depression, anxiety, and stress and whatnot?
All the practices and things that we're talking about.
Spiritual, just being aware, right?
Yeah, everything that everything we're discussing is either something we've tried or are currently doing or are curious about. So yeah, that's where it came from. I think for me at least is like having been through some things and having a different outlook, being kind of forced to adopt a different outlook, or be incredibly depressed, and just wanting to share that with people, and seeing also that other people at Columbia are like hungry for this knowledge, or just for kind of a different perspective. People want to know, but they don't quite
have the
I think
resources
everyone,
to means
yeah,
to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Although everyone could have, like, it's just a matter of time, you know, before you meet the person or, you know, read
find
the article,
the book, you know, whatever
anything,
that might be. I personally find perception to be the strongest tool that we have in our psychology. It's again how you orient yourself towards things that come your way, right? And I don't know if you've realized it, and I don't know if it's true either, but personally for me, it helps me attack the root cause of problem is through editing my perception, is through looking at things from a variety of standpoints, managing that. And I don't know if it's going to pan out this way, but take a poll, take a survey, see if people who follow the practices that read your newsletters find that they are able to tackle personal issues that they were dealing with better now that their perception is more in their control, now that they can handle the way they see the world.
Well, I think it's all perspective, you know, with any problem.
Right.
And I think, I don't know if this is kind of a GS arrogant kind of thing, but I think that a lot of people in college in general, not just at Columbia,
Are ungrateful.
well, they just don't have that perspective
Right.
of having, you know, been out in the world somewhere doing something else. And then, you know, if you've just been to school your whole life,
Right.
it's hard to see the world outside of that and know, like, oh, whatever's going on now is just, it's going to
Temporary.
pass.
Right.
You know? And it goes for everybody everywhere on different levels, but
There was a king. There was a king who found the wisest man in his kingdom and asked him to work with an ironsmith to make a ring for him and write something down on that ring that will forever keep him sane. And this man goes back. He spends a week trying to think of something that could fit on a ring that would keep this man sane forever. And he finally came up with a sentence that they put on the ring, and the sentence was, "This too shall pass." And that makes sense on any direction. You just choose which way you want to use that sentence for. And it's been extremely comfortable having that sentence in my active memory to just go back to it and then, you know, relax. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that what is that there's no in terms of treating the root cause over the symptoms. I think there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
You know, use of I'm going to shift my perspective to this and it's going to make me feel better. And I think that like divine order and divine source may be the concepts that I needed to shift my perspective, and we might all be able to sit here and like revel in the idea that death is something that grounds all of us and gives us perspective.
Right.
But for someone else, you know, it's something completely different. It's just grounding themselves in 5 minutes of meditation a day and having that calm, or it's
going for a run.
Yeah, going for a run, or you know, getting into yoga, or just even deciding to sit down like for 10 seconds every day before you eat a meal and just, you know, be really grateful for that.
Ooh, sorry.
That's okay. And just one of the things that I was thinking is that, you know, I think the beauty of mindfulcolumbia is that we're not trying to tell anyone there's one right way to do this. And if someone really relates to one idea or one article that we have and it really helps them, that's amazing. And then we could have an article the next week about something completely different, and that could help someone else. And, you know, I think it's just trying to give all of these different perspectives and get so many people to give their own perspectives, and spread it from there.
I think it's not just what to do, but how to find what to do, which is also an essential impartation that you'll find coming your way when you set out on this endeavor. Also, because it's a student-run thing, there is the possibility of hope for other students open up, right? It's no longer a distant professor figure who's talking about it. It's something more real, more tangible in that sense. In your dive into academia, have you ever found yourself at a crossroad where you find both these worlds, the academic and the spiritual, come to either a confluence or a disagreement? Studying anthropology or whatever, Ali, you intend to major in, have you?
Whatever it's gonna be.
Just pick any. Have you bumped across literature on spiritual practices that has had an impact on you?
Well, certainly in the Buddhism class we took last semester with Professor David Kate. The
Shout out.
conversation, yes, everyone should take a class with him. He's awesome.
Yeah, wonderful person.
Yeah, the conversations we had every week were just so illuminating. One book that I'll never forget, it was by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he's just such a sweet, beautiful human. And he just wrote about the Buddhist concept of emptiness, and he reframed it as interconnectedness or interbeing. And he just wrote about how, when you are reading this very book, you are interacting with the lumberjack who cut down the tree, and then his whole ancestry, and the sun that grew the leaves and the paper, the ink, and every little aspect of it. Everything's all connected, and you can play that game with literally anything. And so, I guess that was within a Buddhism class, so it's kind of to be expected.
Right.
I found. Go ahead.
You mentioned science. You mentioned how you found science spiritual. How's that? How does that work?
The micro and the macro.
Right.
The pictures of galaxies, and they look like atoms. To me, that's something. I don't know what it is, but and just the beauty in nature. I took an astronomy class one, and the part before we got to Newton was, because after that it was
purely scientific, fact oriented.
It was just tough for me with the math part.
Right.
But
there is this.
But even in that, there's just so much that I find these laws. Newton's third law is a Buddhist concept.
Karma.
Yeah,
it's essentially karma. Yeah.
So to me,
Right. There is this biologist who I really like. He is an English guy. His name's Rupert Sheldrake. He is thought to be one of the top 50 world leaders in the world and whatnot. And he has a concept that has a very interesting story behind it. But he has a concept called morphic resonance. Nobody in academia is ever going to pay heed to that. Now that he's credible, people do listen, but there's no way to test it out. There's no research as such in the area. But what he says is that in a very weird form, all species carry a residue, a resonance from their ancestors, right? So a more tangible or a more pointed experience of such is when you consume psychedelic substances. He says that what you are essentially seeing is what that species has accumulated in the generations that it's been part of this world. And so in that sense, everything embodies everything that has come before. And if somebody could put a pin on that, science is spiritual right there. There is absolutely no denying at that point, because what really morphic resonance is a complicated term for is the spirit. There is pretty much nothing else. He could have phrased it far simply and people would have been like, shut up. So he had to add a scientific lingo to the entire thing. But he mentions how when he was a graduate student at Cambridge, he goes to his professor and he says, this is what I really want to study. And this guy's like, listen, if you want to study this, get out of academia. Nobody's ever going to let you research. Nobody's going to give you money for this. And he kept that dream, this vague conceptualization of an idea as an infant till the time where he was in a place where he could do his own work. And most of his work, I think, is philosophical. It's not really scientific at this point, but there is some sense to that part too. And epigenetics is a phenomenon in biology that straight up points to that very thing. It gets passed on in some form or fashion.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because we all took this concept of interconnectedness and spirituality into different places. Because what I immediately thought of when you were talking about emptiness and interbeing and this concept was actually economics and Marxism. And that if you read about Marxism today, you can't help but be so grateful and mindful for the world that we live in, because all he talks about is how we are so distant from supply chains these days and how long they are. And we can sit here and we can look at this tea bag that Eden is drinking right now, and someone else manufactured this string, and someone else manufactured the ink to put on the label, and someone else manufactured the piece of paper, and entirely someone else manufactured and grew the herbs that were eventually dried to be made into the tea bag. And we go to a store
and we buy it,
and we buy a box of tea, and we put it in our tea bag and we drink our tea, and we don't even think about all the people along the way that made it possible to have the experience of sitting with a bunch of friends in my living room and drink tea. And if that's not spiritual and connecting all of us as humans, then I don't know what is. And we can all take this in different ways. And it's like academia may want to not get into the hippy dippy, tree hugging
Yeah,
part.
they're still fighting the
of
counterculture.
spirituality,
Yes.
but it's all right there. The signs are all there. It's
Right.
just how you're going to interpret it.
All of that is very fine, and it opened my mind to a new way of looking at things. But I don't know how you figured in Karl Marx there. Help me understand what is Marx. How is Marx talking about all of this?
Marxism and his just whole idea of consumerism.
I think Marx was a brilliant sociologist. I don't think he was smart on the economic and the human behavior end of stuff. That's my personal view on him.
It's questionable.
No, yeah, my view or Marx's view?
Both.
Both. Okay. I mean, we can stop at that because we don't have to discuss politics here. Okay, I have a few personal. But wait, hold on. I have one more question. Where do you want to take this enterprise as far as Columbia and mindfulness is concerned? What's the end goal?
What is the end goal?
Just have a more mindful campus,
Right.
and have a place, a community across campus where people can discuss these things and connect and make friends and share, what they've learned or what they're interested in. Just a place, because we really found that in this Buddhism class where, for some reason, we had this little community,
Right.
and I see it as just expanding across campus because there's so many people in the 4 different undergraduate schools, graduate
Right.
students, that have a lot to share. And
How will you
we have to connect.
ensure survival for this group once you graduate? Because I'm assuming you graduate pretty soon. At least you do.
I have like 2 more years.
Oh, 2 more years.
And I have
4?
4 more.
I have 3 more years.
3
yeah.
more.
You can't point 4 fingers and then say it's 3. That's not how mathematics
I held up
operates.
4, and then I thought to myself, I'm coming to the end of my first year, so I
You have 3 more years. So you
And
guys
we
are here
have
for a
some,
while.
other
Right.
underclassmen that are interested and
Fair.
involved too.
Fair.
And we're going to do some heavy recruiting as more people come in.
If you need any help with that,
rope
we
people
just set
in.
up a club. I understand the dynamics of setting a club here on campus. Just make sure you ask me. Now what does a day in life for the 2 of the most spiritually intense people at Columbia look like? What is your routine like? What are your routines like? Is it just classes and wherever you can find time to invest in meditation and whatnot, or do you have a specific routine?
I don't really have a specific routine.
You seem fluid like that.
Yeah, I just do what feels good when it feels good. And I have, certain time, like at this time on Thursday is like a yoga class that I like, so I try
Right.
to make it to that every Thursday. That's a bit, more routine. But I try to just, in any moment that I can get, try to, even if it's just taking like one deep breath.
Right.
Or one of my favorite things is like in a walk between classes, just to think of as many things as I can
possible.
that I'm grateful for. Or I'll listen to like chants
Right.
or really calming music and kind of make that a meditation as I walk. And getting as much exercise as possible. Like I try to do it once a day, but it doesn't always happen.
I feel like chants like automatically center you. You
Chants
don't,
are magic.
Right. You don't even have to focus at that point. Like if
Yeah.
you just let yourself go, it'll bring you directly to the center.
Yeah.
That the Sufi music I was mentioning is
Yeah.
is in the nature of chant. It's analogical to chanting in some sense. So it just operates in a loop. It's circular, and you just never leave the center after a while. And it's like 30 minutes at least. One
Yeah.
qawwali goes on for hours sometimes. So you just like you're working, you're right centered in what you're working, and you're listening to this philosophical notion of love like never before. So it's pretty
Yeah.
chill.
This is, music is like a really amazing tool for me. And there's actually a lot of science behind sound. And in the one yoga studio that I love, they have a quote. Einstein said, "Everything in life is vibration." There's like a science, spirituality.
Right.
All the people talking about vibes, like Einstein had some
Right.
something to say about that.
I think the stoners messed up the idea of vibes as soon as they started hashtagging good vibes on their pictures with weed, right? Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
there's-
generally how you proceed with your spiritual practices, right?
yeah. I try to integrate them.
How about
into
you? Do you have a routine?
I think that routines are very hard to maintain in this 21st century life, and I feel like even you should write an article of like how to be spiritual on the go, because that's such a
it's a unique trait.
No,
undoubtedly is. Yeah,
it's really underutilized time. Like I know for me is I'm going from one class to another. I pop my AirPods in. I'm like jamming out along the way, and then I get there and like nothing productive happens. But if you think about it, everyone has those moments when they're walking to and from class, and they have the opportunity to do those kinds of practices. So stay tuned, folks. There's going to be some sort of article.
You're being coerced into writing an article for all of us. Yes.
And the other thing is that, you know, when you set out time, like for me at least, sometimes if I'm like, okay, I'm gonna meditate for 20 minutes at this time, it's like I just am not gonna do it.
Yeah.
You know, when you schedule yourself so much and then you just
overscheduling. Yes, absolute
or
problem.
you just can't. Then you set an expectation for yourself, and then it's like it's just hard sometimes for me to do that. So it's not. I just go with it. Every moment can be spiritual. Every moment can be a meditation.
Right. I have a friend at BU, incidentally. He's one of my closer friends. I've known him since forever. And he is more invested in the kind of things that you guys are invested in than I am. So I've heard about the embodiment, manifestation, all of this stuff from him before. But he has a massive problem with overscheduling. So he's just going to wake up one day and be like, I'm going to get everything done in this fucking 1 week for a year, right? And he's going to overschedule. And that's what I think is his problem. He just refuses it outright. And he just never gets stuff done because it's so much. First, it's so much stress. Right, it is overwhelming.
Yeah.
I see. What is your favorite change in you since Columbia happened to you? Both of you.
I mean, it changed everything. It's changed. I've learned so much.
But if you were to pick one, what would be your favorite change? Do you have one?
It's so hard because it wasn't like I started in August. I moved to New York, and moving from Tel Aviv, it's been such a whirlwind of so many different changes happening in my life. The fact that I'm so close to my family now, and I get to spend so much time with them, that I'm back inside of an American culture, which has made me very, very cognizant of things that I don't like about having been brought up American, and as well things that I don't like about the society and culture. And I'm sort of disappointed in how it's made me very what's the word I'm looking for? It's I feel like I do a lot of critiquing.
So you've become more critical?
Yeah, I've definitely become more critical of culturally. But I feel like being a student, and you're very much in your own world, you know, progressing for your own academics and your own education, your own career. Which is something that I hadn't been so focused on in terms of really turning inward.
Right.
And but I do think that coming to Columbia has made me more self-aware and made me turn and focus in more on myself than I have in a while.
In the past, right?
Yeah.
Can I say two?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Say three.
Well, one thing is kind of just general. I mean, the ballet world is so small, and you just have to be so in it. There's no time, really. Or you don't have time or energy to do much else. So just being at Columbia just opened up my world. Like, there's so much to learn, and there's so many interesting things to do and to, you know, be exposed to.
Right.
So just that's one. And then the other thing is, honestly, over time, it has made me, like, being in school has given me more confidence in myself, actually, because in ballet, you never get a confirmation. Like, if you get you get a role, you get a good part, or you get hired for a good job or something, there's some confidence in that, or some
confirmation in that, some validation in that, right?
And some feedback, you know.
Right. Feedback's the proper word, I think. Yes.
But at Columbia, with academia, you get feedback on your work, and you can ask, you know, your TA, your professor, like, how can I improve this? And it's clear, and you can do it, and feel that.
So it's given you more confidence in that sense.
Yeah.
It's given you a more direct line of feedback that you can work
Yeah.
on and improve upon yourself from.
Yeah, and to
Right.
have it not matter,
Like the
so
life and
much-
death situation
Yeah.
that you'd see in ballet, because that's the end of
Yeah.
the world while you're in there,
Yeah.
kind of. Am I right? Am I correct?
What do you mean by the end
Like
of the world?
end of the world in the sense that if you don't get this job, or if you don't get this role, or if you don't get hired, or if you're
Totally.
imperfect, right? It's the margins are broader in that sense. So you either fall on this side or you fall on that side. There is more of a spectrum here. You can be a B plus who can go to an A minus, an A minus who can go to A, and so on.
Yeah,
Right? There's
there's
always
that-
scope for improvement.
Yes. And also, this is more personal, but just having that value not be about my body or what I
Can't
look
change.
like, or exactly what I can
It's
change.
very powerful,
You
yes.
can always edit a paper and make it better, or you
Right.
can like study more and do better on the next test.
Nobody
you
likes
know?
being told that they're not. It's not even about being pretty or not pretty. It's about being not pretty enough or not good looking enough that is more bothersome. Like so when they assess you and your eyelashes so and so. It's not really that your eyelashes are bad. They're not good enough, and that hurts way more in some weird fashion.
Yeah,
At least to
good
me.
enough, and the good enough is also, decided by one person's subjective opinion.
Right, and you can never have faith in that.
Yeah, so it's nice to have. There's still subjectivity in academia for sure, and especially in humanities.
But it's more
But-
consensual subjectivity
Yeah.
than it's like an arbitrary form of subjectivity
Yes.
too, right?
So yeah.
What's a prerequisite virtue in someone you love? What do you want to have in somebody? Like without it, it's a deal breaker. For me personally, it's honesty. I cannot deal with somebody who just cannot be absolutely honest, and I mean that very, very, very sharply. How's about yourself?
It's so interesting when you asked that question. I thought you were looking for what specific quality do you find in someone that you love, that you admire, and I sort of immediately thought of my grandma. My grandma has this most beautiful way about her, and that she loves everyone, and everywhere she goes she greets everyone with a smile. And my favorite thing in the world is like walking into a restaurant with my grandma and she pretends like she's best friends with everyone in there just to like make everyone feel special. And
Right.
she's like this 5'2" Jewish woman from Brooklyn who walks in with her like big belly and her super short hair, and she like goes up to the first waiter she sees and she's like, I love you. You're my favorite.
Oh, I see. I
And
see.
just like not afraid to say that to someone, and not afraid of how, like, I feel like if I came up to someone and I said to them like, I love you so much, you're so great, I'd be worried about what people think of me.
Right.
But she just wants to give. She just wants to give people that feeling of feeling loved and feeling seen.
Right.
And I think it's the most beautiful quality in the world. She's my favorite person in the world. I'm
I
gonna
see.
start crying.
That's right.
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's amazing.
Right. How's about you? What do you think?
I guess it would be someone who is willing to look within themselves.
Somebody who's introspective, self-reflective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. What's one virtue you credit your success to, and one vice you credit your failures to?
I guess one virtue I'll credit my success to is just being hardworking and doing, pushing myself to do everything
Right.
I can.
So you're determined.
Determined.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just putting everything in so I know that I did everything I could.
And how about the vice?
My vice would probably just be doubting myself.
Right. Okay.
And even that, I don't like to think of things. I mean, yes, like I have failed many times at many things. But I like to see all of those moments as,
Right.
learning and
Learning
growing.
experiences.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say that all of those
Vices.
failures and vices are also virtues.
Right. Or also virtues. How about you?
I would say that I get this quality from my dad, in that we're both sort of we're stubborn and we're also very, very fast to come to conclusions. So we're very, very decisive.
I wonder if it's an accountant thing, because I inherited the same.
No, because my mom isn't like that, and she's also an accountant. But like, if I decide that I'm going to do something, I do it the next day. I decide that I'm going to move to Israel and I'm going to join the army.
It has to happen now.
And if I decide that, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm going to find a job in high tech, and I find it. And it's just like one day to the next, I make a decision and I go with it.
Right.
And looking back, they're not always very calculated, and they're not necessarily good plans for the long run.
But there is virtue to it.
Yeah,
Right.
but I'm a gut feeling person. I truly believe that it's gonna bring me somewhere.
Right.
And then, honestly, when you asked about daily spiritual practices, it brought up a lot of shame for me because I'm not disciplined and I have a lot of difficulty with follow through. I'm a starter. I'm not really a finisher.
Right. I wonder if that's an accountant thing too, because that's something I inherited as well.
I'm just gonna bring it all back to accountants.
I hate them. I have a particular soft spot for accountants at this point.
Right.
Right.
But I do strive to be a little bit more disciplined and be able to say, I wake up every single morning and I do this. I admire the heck out of people who have practices like that.
Right. Right. Thank you so much. I hope I made you think, at least in this process. I learned so much.
Questions.
Thank you.
Really
I
great
put in like 15 minutes into them. So.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in.